David, hello.
You are, David.
Hey, Jason, how are you? Hey, turn it up. Oh, you are?
What's
It's
that?
your feedback because you have your microphone or you have your speaker on.
No, I'm muted.
No, you have your speaker
How do I shut
on. Technology.
up? As fun as it sounds.
Hi, Tim.
How you doing?
Good, buddy.
Good to see you. Haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
How you doing, David?
I'm tired.
Uh-oh.
Did that fix it?
All right. I don't hear any reverb, so that's progress. Well, so that chair goes back really far. So basically, this is just going to be a conversation, kind of a roundtable type of thing where once we get everybody on, we have Senator Lakey, we have Representative Nekachea, we have you two, Mary Failing, and Ruby is going to be in for a little while from ACLU. And I just really want to see what, I think I used the language in some of the promotional that where are we at, what works, what doesn't work, and where do we go from here, and see if a senator that's as a Republican has ideas that are different from somebody who has lived experience, or is different from somebody who's a representative that's a Democrat or has a difference of opinion about it versus someone who works at the department and kind of sees it every day from that perspective, and see if there are a lot of things that we just go, man, that actually we all feel the same way, or man, it's interesting that you see that way because I see that this way as somebody who has lived experience, and just kind of facilitate a little conversation today about where we're going, where we're at. Fair chance, we're definitely going to start off with fair chance just to kind of touch on that and see what everybody thinks about that, and maybe touch on COVID and just like the world we live in and how does that impact people who are getting out of prison, and what we're able to provide to those people, or whether we should be providing to those people when there's so many people that are affected by COVID. So it's just a conversation, I think. Well, I think Senator Lakey was concerned a little bit about some of his experiences in the past and sometimes feeling a little attacked. And so I definitely will be putting a stop to anything that feels a little bit like, why don't you feel like that? Or why don't you agree with me? Or anything that feels confrontational, because I don't really want it to be like that. So.
Well, he's always kind of been supportive of the fair chance. So, right,
Yeah. Good morning, Representative.
I'll have to go make another cup of coffee real quick. I'll be right back.
I'm just trying to get everything started so we can do Facebook Live and all of that.
Hello,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm tired.
I feel that.
How are things going?
Good. It's my daughter's birthday today.
Woo!
I know. We're gonna eat some cake tonight, I think.
I'm just trying to figure out how to make us go Facebook Live.
I had a problem with that too. Honestly, I don't know how I got it to work either.
Good morning, Senator.
David, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I wasn't sure if I was going into silence myself or what.
Technology. Ugh.
I'll mute myself till you guys get started.
Perfect. We've got just a few more minutes here. We finally got all the little technological kinks worked out, so we're Facebook Live and all of that. Good morning, Ruby. Well, here we are. We finally made it. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. Happy Saturday morning. My name is David Lund. I am the executive director at BarNone, which is an Idaho nonprofit that works on public awareness and advocacy in the field of criminal justice. We feel like all the solutions that are out there for probably all the problems that we face, but certainly in the criminal justice realm, are related to community and can be resolved through community. And so we want to help create a sense of community amongst various perspectives and lived experiences of Idahoans. So we've come together today to present you with a summit on criminal justice, where we've brought together Republicans, Democrats, advocates, people with lived experience, criminal justice administrators, and kind of talk about some of the things that are going on in the criminal justice field, where we're at in Idaho, what works, what doesn't work, and where we're going to go from here. So on this list of panelists that we've assembled for you today, we have Republican Senator Todd Lakey from Nampa. We have Democratic Representative Lauren Necochea from Boise. Of course, we have Tim Lay, who is the Reentry Services Manager for the Idaho Department of Correction. We have Ruby Mendez Mota, who is the campaign strategist for the ACLU of Idaho. Mary Failing, who is a criminal justice advocate and person with lived experience like myself. And Jason Zimmerman, who is also a criminal justice advocate and has lived experience. So I guess we'll just start with going around and letting you introduce yourselves and kind of explaining why criminal justice is something that is of interest to you and why you decided to agree to be a panelist today. So Representative Necochea, should we start with you?
Sure. Excuse me. Thank you, David, for the invitation and for orchestrating all of this. It's such an important conversation. I think I was first drawn to it from some work I did in a previous role studying tax and budget policy for the state of Idaho and really looking into the trends of where we were going, where we've been going for the past couple of decades or so in terms of spending on criminal justice. And I could see pretty clearly that we were on an unsustainable track with just the rapid rates of spending on prison faster than in any other state in the country. And I suspected there were better ways to invest those dollars that could actually make people more successful, make our communities stronger, and yeah, just help people live successful, productive lives. And then I got involved a little bit more deeply over a year ago when I was appointed to the legislature, and Senator Buckner Webb had been working on this fair chance employment and asked me to help on the House side. And it was just a no-brainer to help make sure that people are successful after they serve their time. We need to have everything in place so that they can be successful. And I think part of finding community, part of having that support is being attached to employment, to piggyback on your point that you are making, David.
All right, thank you. I think next we'll touch on with Senator Todd Lakey.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning as well. So I started out my career in the criminal justice field. After law school, I started as a deputy prosecutor for Canyon County, and then served as a county commissioner. And so I've been involved in public service, but got my start in criminal justice, and it's been something that's been important to me throughout my career and in my legislative service. I currently chair the Judiciary and Rules Committee committee in the House, or excuse me, in the Senate. And I come at it, I'm certainly a conservative. I'm a law and order guy. I think public safety is our first priority. I believe in personal accountability. Idaho has a great quality of life, and we're one of the lowest, some of the lowest crime rates in the country, which I think is why people enjoy living here. That said, we need to find a balance between accountability and intervention. We have to address those root causes, not just respond to the behavior. So I think it's important that we help people once they've been accountable to be successful and help them contribute to the great quality of life that we have in Idaho. And I appreciate the work of Tim Lay and Director T-Walt. We've seen some improvement in the efforts we've been making in the last couple of years, particularly in kind of thinking a little bit outside the box, where it's not just accountability and incarceration, but when folks get out, are we looking at housing and employment and transportation and helping people have a foundation to build on? It's ultimately, about personal choice. People have to choose to be successful, but can we give them a foundation to make good choices and be able to contribute again back in the community and be successful. So that's why I'm involved.
All right, thank you for that. Tim, can you go next?
Sure. Thank you, David. So I've been working, I'm the reentry manager for the Department of Correction. I've been in this role for almost 3 years. Prior to that, I spent 20 years at the Department of Labor. And in those years, saw a huge need for helping people that have left the prison system coming back to the community with employment opportunities. And so for about 17 years, I worked with returning citizens just to help them to have opportunities as they came back to the community. Excuse me. Since I've been in this role for the last 3 years, I don't have a box. And my boss, every time I go to her, I let her know I've got some ideas and some thoughts, and she's like, okay, so this is really cool. So we're doing a lot in the Department of Correction right now to improve what we do to help people as they come back to the community. We've started a lot of different things in the last couple of years where now we're issuing state ID cards. We've got them almost in every facility now. Within the next couple of weeks, we'll have them in all 9 of our facilities. So people are going to be able to leave with ID cards. A year ago, we wrote an MOU with the Social Security Administration that we are now able to get replacement Social Security cards. Those are 2 areas that are huge because in my previous life at labor, that was one of the things that really stopped a lot of people from being successful is they didn't have their I-9 documentation. So they couldn't get a job, couldn't open a bank account. There was anything they could do. So we've worked really hard to get those implemented and get those things going. We've worked to improve our transitional funding program to make it a little bit better for people coming out to where we can get them into some good housing. We got a long ways to go on transitional housing because some are good, some are bad. And so there's some work to do on that, but we're making efforts on that. We're working really hard when the creation of the community intervention stations, offering opportunities for people as they come out that they may have issues. We opened a one-stop reentry center a couple of years ago for a grant. I've got 1 year left on that. We've got reentry specialists working with people prior to release, following them when they get released. And this past year, our recidivism rate with the folks we worked with was just over 6%, which was really, really low, proving that intervention makes a huge difference. For the last 2 years, the same group of people, our recidivism was 32% for the 2 years. And the reentry specialist and reentry program is all sex offenders and medium to high risk individuals coming back to Ada County, to District 4. So I believe that we've made a huge impact and a big difference offering a lot of services. We offer food. We've given in the last year at the One Stop Reentry Center over 10,000 pounds of food. We've had over 500 hygiene packets given to people. We've had a couple of hundred backpacks given to people. So we're really trying hard to make a difference with individuals returning to the community. People that know me know that I have a huge heart for people, and I really want to help people by giving opportunities for success. So I'm working real hard to try to get a lot done. I'm not sure what else you want me to say right now, but that's kind of a long introduction. But I'm here because I really like what we're doing. I like the direction our leadership is in within the department. I like the support that we're getting from legislation. I think this is really, really good time right now as the Department of Correction continues to move forward. And even out of Ada County, like in Twin Falls, we're opening a one-stop reentry center. We just opened a CRC over there. So there's a lot of things that's going on in the world of reentry, and I could talk all day, but I'll stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Next, I'll send it over to Ruby.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning, buenos dias to everyone. So like David mentioned, my name is Ruby Mendez-Mota. I'm the campaign strategist with the ACLU of Idaho, and I personally am interested in this because within my work around community organizing and working with directly impacted individuals, I have seen the intersectionality within how the criminal legal system has worked in different issues, and so personally have seen the direct effects of it, and also have also have been working closely with community in like working in direct solutions, right? To find different kinds of reforms that are needed to address the result of mass incarceration, overcriminalization, and also recognizing the racial injustices within the criminal legal system. And so our ACLU national and ACLU affiliate work very closely in addressing these different issues and being able to find solutions not only policy-wise, but also with community, right? Working directly with those that are impacted directly and being able to find solutions with community because those are the folks that know exactly how the system works. They have lived through it. And so what better than to work with them to find those solutions.
Thank you. Mary, would you speak next?
All right. Hi, all. My name is Mary Failing. I am a directly impacted person. I have been formerly incarcerated. Right now, I am the co-founder and liaison for the Idaho chapter of All of Us or None. Our biggest campaign that began back in 2003 was actually the Ban the Box campaign. And so this really touches on getting employment and allowing directly impacted people such as myself a chance to get employment without being prejudged in that sense. I thought that this reentry summit was going to be really fun because we can kind of incorporate all of these different views and get people from both sides of the aisle with all these different experiences together to try to kind of build a better criminal reformation justice system and not only work on like interventive programs, but also preventative and proactive programs to try to kind of work in the community and stop this before it even begins.
Thank you. And Jason.
Did you pick on me because my last name is Zimmerman? So my name is Jason Zimmerman. I am also a formerly incarcerated person. I was charged in 1994 with aggravated assault and involuntary manslaughter, and I received two 25-year consecutive sentences. I'm currently on parole as we speak. I top out in 2029. So I've been in and out of the system ever since. Multiple attempts of trying to be and do the right thing and be, a good citizen, and a few failures. And I was last incarcerated. I was let out on October 10th of 2006. So, and I've been out ever since and have somewhat kind of incorporated some mentorship and some leadership skills into that. And I've been successful as a citizen ever since. So I kind of got involved in the advocating about a year ago, and I've been kind of following some politics. Being a parolee, I don't have a vote, so but I wanted to find somewhere and somehow that I could make a difference and try to help more people and try to help the system help more people, or however you would explain that. But a friend of mine talked about the ACLU had a little class, and then after the class, it was on how to talk to and advocate to senators and representatives, and I just kind of fell into that, and I loved it. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I spent pretty much every Monday last session advocating for the Fair Chance Employment Bill. And am going to continue doing that this year as well. So, and for as long as it takes, right? Because I think it's an amazing bill, and I think that it will help lots of people get quality jobs and stay out of prison. So, I could go on a lot about all this stuff, but I think that's a pretty good introduction for now.
All right, thank you for that. So, as I said, I'm David Lund. I'm an impacted person. I spent some time incarcerated, and I wanted my life to mean something too when I got out. Was this pointless? Did I do this time and it was my punishment, and that was all it was. So I wanted to kind of shape it into something that meant something. So the last couple of years I've been working with this nonprofit, BarNone, and we've just kind of been trying to raise public awareness about the criminal justice system, about laws, about how things work, about the issues that people face that often, lead to incarceration. They could be anything from anger issues to drug and alcohol issues, and so many more. And I've met with legislators from everywhere, from Blanchard to Idaho Falls, here in Boise, and everywhere in between. And it's been an amazing learning experience for me, because I think I'm from Coeur d'Alene, but Boise is like my second home. I'm a BSU student, but I live in Coeur d'Alene. And it's sometimes hard to look at the legislature and what's going on in that world and see it as human beings coming together from different districts and having different perspectives and points of views. And then I thought, well, man, we should have a sort of event like that, which is this is a series of summits that we do every quarter, where we do exactly that. But it's not always legislators. This is actually the first time I think we've had a legislator as part of our summit, but bringing people together with all these different points of view so that we can see the representations of what Idahoans really believe on some of these things. Because I know what I think, and it's been shaped by my worldview. But I think there's value in hearing from everyone else and what they believe and what they think and why they think it based on their worldview. Maybe then we can come together and realize how many things we have in common, what exactly our differences are, and then kind of hash it out a little bit and see what kind of compromises and solutions we can come with moving forward. So I guess Fair Chance, like you guys, was my first interaction working with legislators, having meetings, and kind of trying to figure out how this whole advocacy thing worked inside the State House. And so last year was my first experience doing some of that. And it was a little intimidating, of course. The State House is kind of intimidating in general. But you just start meeting these people and realizing they're normal people who do normal stuff most of the time. They just happen to be in the State House for a couple months out of the year. So Fair Chance is special to me, and it's something that I've spoken to both of these legislators about personally, amongst other things. And so I figured we would start there. So my question, I guess, is for Representative Necochea. You're sponsoring this bill this year in the House, and why? Why do you think it's important? Some of the postings that we've done on social media, the Idaho Freedom Foundation says 21% of adult Idahoans have some sort of criminal conviction. The ACLU uses that same number in their literature. And so here I'm one of the few times you can ever see the Idaho Freedom Foundation and the ACLU agree on something, is that 21% of Idahoans have a criminal conviction of some sort. If you do the math, that somewhere around 630,000 people in Idaho have a criminal conviction. So why did you think Fair Chance was important for those people? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, we need, for our communities to thrive, for our economy to thrive, we need all hands on deck, and we need to be able to leverage the talents and skills and what everyone brings to the table. And we also know that you face particular challenges after you've served time, and it's harder to get your foot in the door with employers, and especially if they have these policies of just a blanket policy about not considering your application if you have any sort of record. And we know, I mentioned that our prison spending is very high. Our recidivism rate is very high compared to other states. I think is it 24 other states have some sort of fair chance employment law on the books. And so it's time for Idaho. And we really, there was a lot of negotiation. I know Senator Lakey really helped, just came to the table and helped work through the language to get something that was workable, and that was really, really did very well on the Senate side. It passed overwhelmingly and pretty easily. And the language that we're working with right now, it doesn't have a big penalty, it doesn't have any penalty to employers. We've even added some amendments to make retailers and other nonprofits serving kids, just to make them comfortable, so we could kind of get around their opposition. All we're asking is, consider the application, consider the skills first, make a decision about whether, you even want to, make a phone call with a candidate after you look at those skills. And that just takes down one huge barrier that people face. And the folks, the Jasons and Marys who have been, advocating and telling their story, are so powerful, because that's what legislators need to hear. And when they understand, oh my gosh, this person is pounding the pavement, applying for, 30 jobs in a week, working so hard just to get a job so they can work so hard. I think that really helped them understand that this is such a huge barrier, and we have to knock it down so that people can be successful, can support their families. One thing that I'll remember back from my days of advocating on children's issues and advocating for investment in preschool, because we know when we help people build all those skills when they're really young, they make better decisions over the course of their life, and they're less likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. I remember Director Ranke, who's the director of Department of Corrections, always talking about going out and talking to people who are serving time, and how such a large portion of them had kids. And that just puts extra pressure on people when they need a job to support those kids. And those kids are better off when folks can connect to employment and have steady wages. So it just from the kids to the folks who are looking for work, to the safety of the entire community. It's such a no-brainer that we help people get considered for jobs.
Senator Lakey, how do you feel about fair chance employment? Did you have any concerns about restricting employers or putting extra restrictions on what employers can and cannot do in Idaho?
Thank you, David. And I'll respond to that, but want to start out, I guess, with a thank you for all of you, you and Jason and others that worked on that last year. Representative Necochea. Senator Buckner Webb is a good friend of mine and somebody that I respect and appreciate. And she was working on that for, boy, I think we were talking about it for at least 2 years, if not a little bit more. And I am very sensitive to the employer's perspective. I'm a small business owner myself, and I think it's very important that employer have full discretion, within the confines of the Constitution. Obviously, you can't make hiring decisions inappropriately, but otherwise, let the employer have absolute, full discretion in who they hire and who they feel is best for their business. And going into this, I kind of recognize that this steps on that a little bit, but I thought it was worth the effort, because at the end of the day, their discretion is still completely preserved, but it gives that individual an opportunity to establish a rapport or a relationship or some connection before their resume or their application is just tossed out. And because of the fact that, all of the issues we've talked about with our prison population and the desire to have let these people have an opportunity to be successful, I think, again, that's worth the effort and a little bit of difference at the beginning and having or letting the employer kind of know completely everything about an individual. I said it before, and others have said it. Employment is a key factor in someone's success when they get out of prison, but I think it's a key factor for anyone at any point in life. Employment is the ability to have individual freedom, to have resources, to support your family, to pay your expenses. So again, that's another reason why I think it's okay for a little bit of an infringement at the beginning, so to speak, on that employer's initial discretion. But yes, I was concerned about the employer's aspects of it, but Senator Buckner-Webb and the ACLU and others were great to kind of work to try to find that appropriate middle ground, where again, it gives someone a chance, which I think is so critical. We have, I think we still have more jobs than we have people. Even with the COVID mess, there's still a lot of employment hiring notices we see out there. And that's another reason for our economy. Representative Necochea mentioned that. But still support it this year. Haven't kind of seen what all has been working on. Representative Necochea mentioned a few things, but I hope it's successful. Still plan on supporting it, and I hope it goes forward.
Thank you. I think, Tim, you have a really unique perspective in this because you met with a lot of people that came out of prison, like myself, when you were at labor, and you saw kind of the difficulty that they had, and you kind of worked with employers to convince them, I think, that people who have criminal convictions are not necessarily terrible human beings or bad employees, and they should hire them. So maybe you should share your perspective on some of that experience.
Okay, thank you, David. So that's true. One of the things that I would always find is when I met with somebody, and I spent a lot of time at the District 4 office, I spent a lot of time in the prisons and a lot of time in county jail, meeting with a lot of people one-on-ones and providing job search classes for individuals to try to prepare them for release and job search. And one of the things that I would always learn first is I would want to talk about their skills and abilities. What do they have to offer? I would always ask the question about their offense. And you can't judge anything on an offense based on a title. There's always a story behind the offense. And so what I would always encourage people to do is let's talk about the story. What happened? Why did it happen? What's your story about what led up to your conviction? When I would hear that, I would always talk to people and kind of educate them on how to present themselves to a potential employer. A lot of the times people had some really super great skills. I'll give an example. There was an employer that would not hire sex offenders, period. They didn't care. I had an individual, and this has happened many times, where they have really good skills. I had known them for a period of time, and I felt that they would make a good employee because of getting to know them and not solely, listening to or looking at just what the offense conviction was. I would call employers and I would say, hey, I've got an individual here who has, ABC skills, and I think they would really be a good candidate for your position. Would you consider hiring them based on the skill base? And we're like, yeah, that person sounds like they'd really be a good hire. I'd say, okay, so I also need to inform you, they do have a felony conviction, and the conviction is for this, and here's what they did. And I would always get the permission of the individual prior to giving any kind of information. And they would always be like, yeah, if you can give me an interview, that'd be great. So I was able to get sex offenders interviews at organizations and businesses that typically would never hire them. Then it was up to them, based on their skill and their interviews, of whether or not they actually got the job. One individual was convicted of rape over in Mountain Home. And his story was one that he had an affair with his girlfriend who was underage. So therefore it was against the law. When I explained to the employer that was the conviction, the employer was like, well, yeah, send him over. I want to interview him. Long story short version, he's been there for about 4 years now, and he's been promoted twice into a supervision position. But just getting his foot through the door, that was really important. A lot of employers will say, blanket, I won't hire a felon. Blanket, I won't hire a sex offender. So there are some offenses that they're very adamant that they won't. But if they had an opportunity to explain their story and what really happened, that really makes a big difference to people. And I feel that people having an opportunity to meet with folks, with employers, and at least go through the interview process is important. I also always encouraged and told people that whether the employer knew they had a felony conviction or not, that they always needed to bring that up in an interview process towards the end of the interview, so that the employer doesn't feel like they're, trying to come through the back door, or they're lying to them or whatever. So I always encourage them to at least bring it up at the end of an interview, so that the employer did know, I do have it, but here's what happened. Here's my story. So I could tell you a lot of the times where I do have, I've worked with a lot of people where I've had some pretty good successes on at least getting them to the employer based on that. So I think that's something that I do believe in. I do believe is really important.
Thank you, Tim. How about you, Mary? Do you have anything, any personal experience that you'd like to share about why you thought fair chance was so important?
Well, a lot, but first I want to go back and address the current bill that is being championed by our representative. I wanted to know if we were going to address whether or not it's a public sector or private sector, if it's both, and does it stipulate that a background check is going to be able to be initiated after a conditional offer is made? So do you have that answer for me?
Yeah, I can go ahead and address that. So the current negotiated draft between, stakeholders, and just basically it mirrors pretty closely the bill that moved forward and was passed out of the Senate last year. An employer can still do a criminal background check. It can do a criminal background check before a conditional offer is made, and the employer can't ask about your criminal background until after a decision has been made about whether you get an interview. So your application, your skills, everything you put forward has to be considered. Now, there's no definition of what an interview looks like. So they aren't under an obligation to go through, if they have a 3-step process, they don't have to go through all of those 3 steps. They could do a phone interview with you as a first step, and they could ask you then about your record. So it leaves things, it gives the employer a bit of discretion in what they do after they decide whether or not your application warrants consideration, if that makes sense. So it's that foot in the door. But I think, and Senator Leahy could speak to this as well, some of the pushback we actually got was because people on the House side, some representatives had the understanding that you had to go through the whole process, a weeks-long process, and only then at the end you could ask. And they were concerned that people would, this is what they said, their concern, their words was that they felt like they could, a small business owner could lose a lot of time going through a whole bunch of steps only to find out something that would be a deal breaker for them. And so I think that the attempt is to try to put a lot of control into how the employer makes the decision, but making sure that those skills and the application gets full consideration, that it just doesn't go into the discard pile at the outset, if that helps.
Perfect, thank you. That answers my question, my curiosity. When I first got out, I was lucky because I have some family members who are like managers in restaurants. And so I kind of got my foot in the door that way. But I think as somebody who has a felony, there's a lot of shame and guilt that goes into trying to achieve goals. Like you're not worthy because you're a criminal and you're a felon and you're bad. And you just fall into this label theory of that's what I am, that's who I am, and that's how I'm supposed to act. However, if you can kind of break that cycle and that lifestyle, there is an opportunity for you to be able to flourish and grow even with felonies. Like I started out in the restaurant business and now I work with developmentally delayed adults. Like there is a chance, but it does take that requirement of getting off of probation or parole. And so there is this gap of people who, like Jason, are doing fantastically well over almost decades and are not able to get employment just due to that fact. And and when it does come to the interview process, I think with that shame and guilt comes along the fact that you do mention, when you have a felony, you mention that in your interview. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste the possible employer's time. And if you get ahead of it, then you're able to share that story and you're able to kind of bring them into your experience, and maybe they can grow an empathy for you. And that's kind of how it works when you have these convictions.
I definitely agree with that. I spoke in front of both committees last year and shared my story. You know, I go to BSU. I would love to work at BSU, and I applied for everything from janitor jobs to administrative assistants and never could even get an interview. But when I moved back to Coeur d'Alene, Washington State University is right across the state line in Spokane. They have a law in Washington that prevents background checks going further than 10 years in your past. My criminal convictions are more than 10 years. So on paper, I just look like a very normal, everyday, average person. And I got a job at the interview for an administrative assistant job at Washington State University, which I could never achieve in spite of many, many tries at Boise State University. And I just thought, why can't we be doing that? And so I definitely see the arguments made about personal accountability, but I've also see that any conviction in Idaho kind of feels like a life sentence of sorts. And so I'm trying to figure out myself in the advocacy work that we do, how to balance those two things. How do you give people their lives back and say, you have, you've paid your price, you've finished your sentence, you've done what you're supposed to do to make amends and do right because you did wrong. How do we move forward? Let you move forward with your life. So I love your story, Jason, because you're living it and you've actually had some great opportunities. So maybe you can share some of that with us again.
So I got out of prison in 2006. I kind of discussed that in my first introductory speech, but I'd worked in the granite countertop business for long time, and I was a good employee, and I got to go to the work center before I got out of prison. So I'd already had a job before I got out, which is a huge plus and benefit for guys that are coming out and to re-enter into society. I mean, you're already, you have a little bit of money saved up, so you don't have to worry about your bills and all that stuff, and it just relieves a lot of that anxiety and that pressure of, oh my gosh, now what. So I had somewhat of an agreement that as soon as I was released, they were going to give me a raise. I made basically minimum wage at the time, and there were, with my skills and my qualifications, I should have been making, probably more than what most people made as employees at this business. So when I got out, I asked them, hey, what's going on? And they said, well, we can't really give you a raise right now. We're going to give you one in December. December comes around. Nope. And it was like, really? And so I got kind of discouraged, and I wasn't trying to find another place to work. I just was toughing it out because I trusted that these guys were going to pay me what I was worth. And I realized as soon as I realized it didn't happen, I walked into another granite shop and they hired me on the spot. I didn't fill out an application or nothing, and gave me a $4 an hour raise from what I was making. In 2008, when the economy started kind of getting crazy, I had to file for unemployment a couple of times just with the amount of work that was available. And I decided, I'm going to go get my CDL, and I'm going to get hired on at the at ACHD, the Ada County Highway District. I applied for every position for 4 years, never got an interview, a phone. I called, but they never called me or discussed anything. And so the last year, I believe it was 2011, I decided I'm going to go work as a temp. temps don't get paid very much, but I was, I was going to do everything I could to get hired on. And I knew, well, if I work there as a temporary employee, they're going to see my work ethic, they're going to see my skills, and they're going to want to hire me. So I got hired on as a temporary employee. All the guys on the crew that I worked with really enjoyed me and were, putting in good words at the supervisor level. And I still couldn't get an interview. There was one other guy that was a temp as well. He was getting interviews, but he wasn't getting the same kind of, you know, um, recognition from the other employees. Like, hey, this is the guy that we need to have on our crew, or, hire this guy. And at the end of you can be a temporary employee for 8 months. At the end of that, I went to one of the deputy directors at the county and I said, look, like, can I just get an interview? Like, I get that maybe you're not going to hire me or however that works, but at least give me a shot in an interview. And I can't say whether that had a big difference or played a difference or whatever into that role, but I got an interview on the next job that I applied for, and they hired me, and I've been there for 9 years. And they have a bunch of leadership programs, and they've been putting me through these classes, and it's been an amazing job, and the atmosphere at the county is amazing. I mean, I love my job, and I look forward to going to work every week. So, um, but that's where my heart is really in the fair chance employment, is that, once I mean, I have a retirement plan, I have benefits, my kids are, taken care of. I don't need to worry about none of that stuff. When I worked at the granite company, like, if my kid got hurt or something, I was in debt to the hospitals or whatever because I didn't have insurance. I didn't have any benefits. Those jobs are, we can get those jobs as felons, and sure, that's not a problem, but jobs that have benefits, jobs that are career playing jobs are the ones that we need to be getting to stay out and to do, to be a positive and productive members of society. And this bill allows that to happen. So.
I definitely think that there is a stigma attached to people who have been in incarceration. Tim talking about it. I feel like I've experienced it myself, that everybody gets lumped into these, this label, like you're one of those people. I don't even think they even quantify exactly what those people means to them. It's just like, oh, yeah, people who've been to prison, they must be dangerous, or they must be scary, or they can't be trusted. So I imagine, Ruby, that you've been compiling some of these stories of people like this. Is that a general attitude for Idahoans, is that people who've been incarcerated are frightening or scary or other?
Yeah, I think, when we think about fair chance, I think we have to think of the bigger picture, right? Of what it actually does. And I think it destigmatizes of who is applying, right? We all know, we all have a loved one or a friend or a neighbor or someone that has a criminal conviction, right? And that has faced these barriers. And so what Fair Chance does is removing barriers, but more than anything, it's a huge educational opportunity, right? Of why these individuals, are so resilient in, trying to thrive, in trying to provide for their families and their loved ones. And, part of the work that we do with community is uplifting the stories of each individual and being able to have them share those experiences, because then it really puts into perspective of like, oh wow, I actually didn't know that you actually face these barriers and how difficult it is to get an employment. And so then we start shifting the way that individuals may think. Of course, we won't all think the same, but at least we give the opportunity to have a discussion and opportunity to have a conversation of why employment is so critical for individuals that are being released from prison, and being able for them to have a job. And so many of the stories that we do hear is of individuals, saying, I'm so qualified. I maybe even overqualified for these jobs. And yet I am completely ignored and not even considered because there is this stigma or this perception of who I am as an individual. And so I think it's really important that as we talk about fair chance, we speak about it in the human perspective of why this is important for individuals to be able to successfully thrive and have an employment, which is so critical for other things that are important that sometimes we underestimate for those that have not experienced having a criminal conviction.
Thank you. One of the things that I was impressed with during the Trump administration was their choice to back some reforms in criminal justice. So, something that I think had been traditionally seen as one side of the equation or one party's agenda kind of started to gain this universal support amongst people on all sides of the aisle. So maybe Senator Lakey, you can touch on that. We've seen the Justice Reinvestment Act and some other things going on here in Idaho. Are there any more discussions going on the Republican side of things about reforms that could be done, or where we go from here? Whether we like spending $300 million a year on the corrections department and things like that. Is that something that is being discussed?
Gotta figure out my unmute, sorry. Sure, that's something that we're always, looking at. And again, credit Director T-Walt as we've talked with him. I think the main reform that we talk about and where I see us having the most opportunity to make the biggest difference is part of what we've been talking about with the fair chance employment, is kind of changing our perspective on what we invest in after somebody has been released, after they've completed their sentence. Traditionally, to a good degree, it's kind of let those folks out and they make their own way. We pay for prison beds, but that after that, it's all on them. I think the focus on housing, on employment, and on transportation, those are the three key elements, as I've learned more about this, to help people, particularly within those first 60 days. And that's, again, not something we've traditionally looked at from a Department of Corrections perspective, but budgeting more in the JFAC process to the Department of Corrections for those items to help cover those things. And then a little different focus on our pardons and parole to help those officers be more effective in supervising folks. So your options aren't just revocation and send them back and put them in jail or back to prison. Can these individuals focus more on the individual and less on performing UAs or just kind of the administrative process of it? We've directed more funds at some new technology and electronic monitoring that helps people keep out of jail or from going back. The community reentry centers, where it lets people be closer to the community as they're transitioning out. It provides some opportunity for people to be locally accountable, again, without going all the way back to prison. So focusing more of that effort on immediate accountability, but not full revocation back to prison, and helping folks stay in the community. Josh, or Director T-Walt, was just sharing some of the numbers with me. But since March of last year, the Department of Corrections has averaged 472 releases compared to 343 new commitments. So more folks are getting out, helping more folks be successful because of that change in perspective on helping people once they're out. So those are some of the main things we're focusing on. That's where I, again, see the most opportunity to have the biggest change. I think our numbers are still such that 70 to 75% of the people that are in have been there before. And if we can help change that dynamic, we're going to have a huge impact financially and all those things which are important, but particularly on the human side.
Thank you for that. So I'm from Coeur d'Alene. The legislature has already funded a community reentry center for the Kootenai County area up there. But there's been a lot of pushback against a facility like that in North Idaho. And even though I believe every one of the representatives and senators from North Idaho voted in favor of it, there was a lot of pushback against them. And some of them are questioning whether they should have voted for that or not. There was an advisory vote on the last election, the last ballot, of how many people were opposed. And it was something like 70+% of voters didn't want one of these facilities in Kootenai County. So we've kind of engaged in a little bit of a campaign to show them that, hey, Nampa has one of these centers and their mayor thinks it's pretty awesome. And actually their police department thinks it's pretty awesome too. And there is no negative consequences for Nampa to have a center like that. Twin Falls was excited to get theirs back, this year, I guess last year. And Idaho Falls is a very similar, conversation where they have had a lot of positive impact from having a facility like that. So I really look forward to, seeing some of the legislators take a lead on that in North Idaho and try to educate the voters up there that, yeah, these are people who've been, convicted of a crime, but centers just like that are key to making sure that they have their lives sort of set up a little bit. They have some money in their pocket, they have some job skills, and they're already rooted in the community when they're released. I think the department is doing the best job, you kind of alluded to this, the best job that they've ever done as far as trying to set people up for success when they're released. Do you think, and I guess any of you can answer this question, the recent Stimulus Act reinstated Pell Grants for people who are incarcerated. So when you're in prison, a lot of the time that you spend there isn't that productive. Do you think that education while you're incarcerated, possibly even vocational programs while you're incarcerated, are part of the answer? And Senator Lakey, you can answer that. Or
Thanks, David. I'll be brief because I've been talking a lot, so I'll let some of the others chime in. But absolutely, education is, again, one of those foundational elements that helps you get better employment, provide skills, whether it's knowledge or skills, depending on, or both, depending on the type of employment you want to pursue. But absolutely, that's a key foundation, and I'm glad they've restored that. And that is part of the focus. Education, job skill training. We've talked about opportunities to give more folks the ability to participate in those programs like Jason talked about while they're in, whether it's in the agricultural community center, lodges bill, to gain education and skills for them when they get out of prison. So yes, definitely a foundation. I'll be quiet, let somebody else talk.
If I may, I'd like to, I'll talk about that a little bit. So, and I agree with what the senator is saying. I've always been a strong proponent, strong advocate for giving people opportunities while they're incarcerated to better themselves when they walk out the gate. Again, from my labor days, one of the things I always tried to push was apprenticeships in the prisons. And it didn't work out that well. We had some through the Idaho Correctional Industries program. There were 22. But we offered some classes in one of our facilities in the construction world over at ISCC. And I always believed that we needed to have an apprenticeship program so that people can get enrolled in the program, and then that apprenticeship would follow them when they're released. So in the last couple of years, we have established 5 new apprenticeship programs in the construction world at ISCC. We've just implemented one over at one of our other facilities at SICKI in a teacher's aid program, and we're working on some other ones right now with Create Common Good for the culinary field. So we're working hard to try to do that. My belief is that if you can give people opportunities, they're going to be one. If somebody wants to succeed, give them the opportunities and the tools and education on how to do that. That desire that they have is going to follow them when they walk out the gate. So a couple of things that we're actually actively working on right now. Last year, we received money from the Lumina grant program. In this Lumina grant program, we're actually bringing the internet into our facility. And part of the grant that we're doing now is we're in the process of building a couple of web pages. One is inside the prison, one is outside for people to be able to utilize. So, and on that web page, what we're looking at is predominantly it's to help them both with education and employment when they walk out the gate. So we're going to have access to a lot of our colleges and universities. We're going to have access for like Department of Labor, Health and Welfare, Voc Rehab, and potentially some employers in there to where people are going to be able to get some online education, look for jobs, and potentially apply for jobs prior to release from the prison. So I think that, that's critical. One of the other programs that we're doing right now, I just actually hired somebody last week. We're in partnership with the Department of Labor and the Workforce Development Council for justice-involved youth employment program through the WIOA program. And what we're doing on that is the individual that I hired is going to be going out to the prisons and meeting with our youth 18 to 24 to help them with these kind of education and employment opportunities. So we're really trying hard to think again outside the box to give opportunities where there haven't been any before. I'm excited about it because this is something where in this particular WIOA youth program, we have a lot of money that we're going to be able to spend on some people to get them to where we know what they need, we know what they want, and we help them when they walk out the gate, they meet with labor, they get enrolled, and they start working right away. That's my goal. And so I think it's really, really important that we give people the direction. We help them make decisions on what they want to do, and then we give them the tools, we give them the opportunities, and then we encourage them as they walk through the gate. So those are some things just briefly that we're working on right now because we do believe very strongly that these are really important. I've always said there's three whatever you call it, three-legged stool for dealing in success. One is meaningful employment. Two is safe and sober living house where you do feel very safe living there, and your support. If you have good support in the community and those three things together are going to help you to be more successful, I believe.
Thank you, Tim. Mary, do you have any thoughts on this particular topic?
I do. I think that it is a great initiative to try to get education into jails and into prisons. I know that I would not be where I'm at right now had I not gone back to school. I graduated CWI last semester with my associate's degree in sociology, and now I'm over at BSU. And so I think that education acts as this like great facilitator to furthering yourself in your career and your life and being able to better provide for yourself and be a more productive community member.
I tend to agree with have taken advantage of any college while you were incarcerated, if it had been offered?
I probably would have. However, I was back and forth between solitary confinement and CCUs. So I wasn't in general population always. And so I wasn't presented with those opportunities because when you're not in general population and you're locked up in solitary CCU and you're not having a good time in jail when you're going to all of these different places, obviously, you don't get those opportunities. But I only did a 6-month stay, so I don't know how much of an opportunity I would have had. My stay was not quite as extensive as some, so I got very lucky. However, after that 6 months, I did recognize the need for education and how it could further my opportunities. And I would definitely be a big proponent into getting like tablets and higher education and these apprenticeships worked into programs, into prisons. And I do believe that that would better facilitate people on their chances of reentry.
What do you think, Jason?
I think, you know, there's a lot of different levels, right? You have the guys that are going to benefit from the education. You're going to have the guys that are going to benefit more from the apprenticeship programs, which I think is an amazing thing. I think building on some kind of an apprenticeship programs, that's gonna help a lot of people out. For me, I think, you know, would I have, I'm not sure exactly. I can't speak for myself, I guess, saying that I would have took advantage of the schooling if it would have been offered to me. Education was kind of a struggle for me. I actually got my GED while I was incarcerated, well, my high school equivalency actually, um, which that part of it went really fast, but I was trying to actually get credits for high school at the same time, and I just couldn't keep up with what I needed to do, which is when I switched over and got my HSC, which I know that those programs have been offered for a long time, but I definitely, you know, at right now where I'm sitting, like I was actually enrolled in college here about 6 months ago. I couldn't handle all the stuff I got going on in my personal life and at work and go to college, so I kind of postponed it for a little, hopefully a short period of time. But you know, w- there's just, it just opens up more doors for the future when you have an education. It just, that there can't be, I don't see anything negative about it, right? So
I do know that some of the pushback that we hear sometimes is people have a struggle sending their kids to college, and they question the value in providing free college to people who are incarcerated and have harmed people and violated the law. I guess I can absolutely see the validity in that argument, but I also think that people who are incarcerated haven't been able to do a very great job of kind of navigating some of the difficulties that life has presented to them. And so they're the people, I speak for myself, especially here, who kind of need the extra help. And so it might be help getting your foot in the door at an employer. It might be a little assistance with getting a college education and some other things. Representative Nekachea, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, to respond to kind of the counter argument you heard, the answer is both, right? We also need to do more to make college, to make college affordable for people who are outside, the criminal justice system. That's never a good argument. Like, if this is hard for me, it should also be hard for you. That doesn't hold much water for me. But whatever the suite of programs are, I think as some folks have already said, for some folks, they need to concentrate on their GED. For some folks, it might be apprenticeship and more, technical skills. And then for some, it might be college and university. Anything we can do to keep people learning, keep them, while you're serving time, you ought to be able to find ways where you can find success and get some positive reinforcement and feel like you're moving forward in your life, so that you can then take those skills, the grit you're going to have to learn, taking a class, that's going to serve you well when you get out the door. So anything we can do to help people just continue to learn and grow and change and evolve, that's going to be then a pattern that they can use to find success when they walk out the door.
What do you think about that, Ruby? Is that something that the ACLU has also seen and also supports?
This initiative was actually very supported by ACLU National and like across the spectrum, right, of political views. And so this was a wide coalition group advocating, because recognizing that this would be a benefit for many folks who have the option to take opportunity of these programs. And I would say personally, like, long overdue in terms of like the accessibility of being able to access this benefit for folks. And so for me, I think it's really important that we open the doors and open programs for folks that have different kinds of skill sets and interests, and to be able to successfully learn and apply those once they are released. And so I believe that's something that has been really effective for folks to be able to go out in the field and then say, I can apply these skills, and I have the opportunity to demonstrate that I am able to perform. And so, and I think it just opens up the pool, the employer pool, right, for folks to be able to apply for jobs that perhaps they haven't considered before.
Thank you for that. So we just got a little message in the chat that I want to address, because it's something that we've heard before, frankly, and it speaks about upon release, people trying to access medical care or mental health care in this case. And the department does release people with a certain amount of medication, but what are their options? And maybe Tim can speak to this, but you know, we've discussed it before, I know, at least a couple times. What are their options? So when people get out and they need to access medical care, what's their best option to do that?
So right now, one of the areas that's been beneficial is the Medicaid expansion. People coming out now are able to apply for, prior to release, for Medicaid. They actually, when they walk out the gate, they can actually make a phone call, and now they're eligible within 24 hours of release, because they usually go through the process prior to release. So they're able to do that. There are some free medical clinics throughout the state as well, where individuals will be able to go in to get free medical care and mental health care. And there also are some nonprofits that actually do have medication programs where they're able to help fund prescriptions. So, you know, we try to get people connected right away with the Medicaid. Most individuals, again, coming out are eligible under the new expansion program. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get people signed up for. So that's one avenue that does help. And it's like they get a prescription. They get, I believe it's like 2 weeks supply and then a 30-day prescription for medication. And that's where sometimes they need help getting those things funded.
All right, thank you for that. So one of the things that we're all dealing with, I think sometimes the people that I speak to who are incarcerated don't fully appreciate the impact that COVID-19 has had on all of us. They have been in a really tough situation where they've been locked down a lot. They've been in their cells a lot more than they ever would have been in the past. There hasn't been any visitation with their loved ones since May of last year at all. There hasn't been any religious services, you know, religious volunteers or any sort of outside volunteers or visitors since May of last year, I believe. And their life has been impacted greatly. A lot of the programs, because they're in cohorts, which is, you know, these groups of people that they try to keep each other around. So if, you know, somebody gets a positive diagnosis, that they aren't spreading it because they're moving around through the facility. So programs have been affected, and the DOC has been working to make sure that people are accessing the programs that they are required to complete before they are released. Education has been greatly impacted. You know, Tim, maybe you're a great person to start this conversation, but it doesn't look like this is going away anytime soon. We were going to have this event at the Lincoln Auditorium at the State House, and we received a phone call that even the State House is not going to be holding events for the foreseeable future. So what exactly are we doing, or are you doing as a department, to help people access some of that stuff? That it's maybe not as easy to go out to your counselor's office as it used to be. It's there are no American Legion groups going on for veterans, things like that. What is the department doing to kind of connect those dots again for people who are now living in a world impacted by COVID-19?
So granted, it's not been easy at all. And I know there's been a lot of folks that have voiced a lot of complaints and concerns. Obviously, the movement restrictions are for safety precautions. We don't want people to be infected by this virus. And so therefore we've had to stop movement because of the spread has been so quick amongst the, living the close quarters. So the main objective was the security and safety of our residents. What we have tried to do is we've tried to do more via the Zoom. I mean, there's Zoom meetings all over the place now, and we try to get the inmate connected via Zoom with either, their counselor or whomever they need to be speaking with. So we've tried to do that or to do phone calls. But the movement has definitely, it's been an impact. I mean, and it's one that we don't like, but it is what it is because of the safety of the residents themselves. We have a lot of our staff members that actually, they've also been affected by this because some of them have gotten sick. And so they've been able to, or, because of, again, the Zoom process, they've had to Zoom in to have their meetings with their folks on their caseloads as well. So it's, it's been an impact on everything. Education wise, we've tried to gear back up to have classes. We do it via, again, technology has really played an important role in trying to do what we do. I don't know the answer as far as how long, because right now it depends on, we've got the vaccine, so staff members are being vaccinated, and as vaccines are available, we're going to be encouraging our residents to get vaccinated, but it's not a mandatory thing. And so we need between 70 and 80% of our residents to get vaccinated to make a big impact on everybody. So there's a lot of discussions with our director and executive staff right now to try to figure out more on how we can, move forward. But right now, again, it's for the safety of the folks that are in the system. But we know it's been an impact, and we do what we can. Again, technology is what's been our friend right now to try to get that done.
I do know that the department has been granted roughly $13 million in CARES Act funds, and some of that has been allotted for technology improvements. And even there's been some discussion about some of that being implemented forever, that people would access programs perhaps via Chromebook, I guess, and that actually is a positive impact that will stay around even after COVID, hopefully, fingers crossed, goes away or it can be managed. So I think we all look forward to that. I think you touched on something that I'm curious about. I'm born and raised here in Idaho, and we're a very kind of libertarian, independent streak kind of a state. And there's definitely not a stomach for mandatory implementation of vaccinations. And so for a facility like a correctional facility, that's very high risk. I just wonder, maybe Senator Lake, he could speak to this. What do we do? How do we roll out a vaccine in Idaho, especially in our correctional facilities, where we're being the most proactive to ensure people's health, but where we don't require our employees to take it or our residents to take it? Do we ever move past COVID if we don't want to take the vaccine, or is there just no place for government to be telling people what to do with their life?
Wow, interesting question. I mean, we get this every session. There's a group of folks that are, anything we pass, sometimes they find a way to connect it to that we're going to mandate vaccines, and we kind of all shake our head a little bit. I'm definitely in that camp that I am not going to force anyone to take a vaccine. I think there's very good reason for them. We don't have polio anymore because of vaccines. I don't, buy into the paranoia, but at the same time, I don't think government should be dictating that. I guess I still land in that same place in the prison system. I know um, you're dealing with a confined population. There's a whole new set of challenges than just, Joe or Jane citizen out on the street. I don't know if we could ever politically get there. There's even a bill, I think I heard about a bill to make it absolute that an employer couldn't require an employee to be vaccinated. And that kind of goes a little bit of the other way in that we're telling an employer what they can and can't do. And we need to preserve some of that freedom. So David, I don't know if I have a realistic answer right now. I'm not ready to go and say that employees have to be vaccinated, state employees. But I'm willing to listen, I guess, to other creative solutions. I don't know what the answer is there, other than education and encouraging people to do it on their own for the right reasons, but stopping short of a mandate.
I definitely respect that you find it hard to find an answer for that, because I find it hard to have an answer for that, because we live in a world where there are people who are making choices for themselves based on their own assessment of how much value that will bring to their lives. We also have people who are making that decision based on misinformation and scare tactics that are being spread around social media and things like that. So it's really tough to determine what people should do when everybody can't even agree on what we're facing, I guess. Representative Necochea, do you have any thoughts on that, or whether it would be prudent for the state to require correctional residents and staff to be vaccinated, or is that just too far?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked Senator Lakey this question first. It is a tough one. And we do have some precedents in the private sector with, healthcare organizations requiring staff to get flu vaccinations who are going to be interacting directly with, vulnerable patients, for whom that virus could be deadly. And with exceptions for, religious reasons. But yeah, there are employers where you can't just say, I don't want to get this vaccine, for the flu. Now, COVID-19 is, for, a host of reasons, has been politicized in a different way than other illnesses that we've dealt with. And there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of mistrust and conspiracy theories surrounding it. So, and I think, what is offered to, inmates versus staff in a prison is also a different question. And I mean, how to navigate that I think inmates should be offered vaccinations and should be, and I believe that's happening. I believe they're they're at greater risk than the general population because they're have to be held in these areas where they're in contact with other people in close contact. And so we need to make sure that they have that option and are kept safe. And maybe there are ways to, I don't know, or organize that so if people choose not to, that they're not, then infecting others. But it's a sticky wicket. I don't think most of us are comfortable with the government saying you have to have this this thing injected into you. But at the same time, there needs to be some flexibility for employers to make sure that they aren't allowing employees to endanger people who are medically vulnerable. So it's not an easy answer. But I do think for the people who, I get a lot of emails, don't mandate the vaccine, don't mandate the vaccine. And I think we're so far from that. That's not what's going to happen. And I would say, if you can get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine. This is our way back to, the economy we all want, the lives we all want, is people getting vaccinated.
All right, I'm going to get away from COVID-19. That thing sounds toxic. I will ask, my board member, Eddie Price is an ICU educator for St. Luke's, and she has something to say about this. I just can't figure out how to get her on screen.
There we go. That's okay. I'm up. You guys finally hit on a topic that I am pretty passionate about as an ICU educator. But so I do have a question for Tim Lay. Since this is such a hot topic and people are so opinionated about it, and it's been so widely discussed, and I have my own opinions about it. But my question for you is, what sort of education is going on that is actually getting to those incarcerated folks so that they can make a decision about whether or not to get the vaccine?
I know that we are providing information on the vaccine. And I know that we're continuing to educate our residents and our staff members on the vaccine. Josh has sent out a lot of emails to staff. I know he sent emails out to the facilities. So we're trying really hard to educate on the benefits of getting the vaccine and showing the statistics and all that kind of thing. So we are providing information because we totally agree that, we have to educate people because they have to make an informed decision. So there is a lot going on to educate folks, again, both our staff as well as our residents on this is the vaccine. Josh had an email just yesterday that even somebody had asked what's in the vaccines, and he's provided that information as well. So there's a lot of information going around, again, to both residents and staff members on what the benefits are and all that. So we've even talked about trying to incentivize it like we've done with the flu shot. We've tried to incentivize that by something, and so there's a lot of discussion. I know I'm working with a group at ISCC. Bree has zoomed into a couple of our meetings and talked to the folks in the meeting that are residents there to ask their thoughts and opinions. So we're asking inmate residents, telling us, this is what would help them. And they've all said the same thing, educate us on what's going on and what the vaccines are and all that. So we are trying to make an effort to do just that.
Thank you for the clarification. I never want to trivialize the loss of life, but there was no but. There's been 6 deaths, I believe is the last number I heard from IDOC, out of thousands of people who are incarcerated out there. So I think you guys were a little slow to start with, enforcing the mask mandates among staff, but you guys have done a really great job of making sure that people are safe. And I think that the numbers bear that out. There have been a lot of people out there that have gone infected, just I think by the nature of the confinement. I think 43% is the number that I heard. So that's thousands of people who have had it and have managed to get through it and are on the other side. And so I just want to say thanks, for keeping all of those people safe.
If I could interject one thing, David, one of the things that I think is pretty cool about, we did take precautions early on. We did try really hard early on to take the precautions that we need. In Idaho, actually, if I'm not mistaken, we were like one of the last 3 correctional in the states departments to actually get COVID. So, several other, correctional institutions in the United States got it. So I thought that we'd really tried hard to take those precautions. So, and we did for a long time before somebody actually finally brought it in or however they got it. But anyway, so we did our precautions early on, made a difference, or we probably would have been a lot worse than we are.
That's true. I stand corrected. So one of the things that you talked about one of the 3 prongs to the stool is housing. And one of the things that we're always talking about over here is housing. How do we, especially in this market, Coeur d'Alene is on fire, Boise's on fire, the whole Treasure Valley. It's hard to find housing for your regular everyday citizen, let alone someone who has some barriers. They ask about the same questions on job applications that they ask on housing applications these days. So I guess maybe I'll go to Jason and ask you, have you had any difficulties with housing? Have you ever, was a barrier?
So personally, with having a job before I got out of prison, I was able to actually make some phone calls, and I paid for uh I actually found a guy kind of contact that would, rent out apartments to felons, and used that resource when I got out. In 2008, I purchased a home, and I've been so I'm kind of fortunate to live in my own home, and my home value has tripled. So I don't know if that's a good thing because I can't sell it because I wouldn't be able to move anyways. But for me, I guess I haven't really had any issues. I would say though that I help a lot of guys, and I work with a lot of guys in the community, and this is a huge issue right now with finding somewhere to go. I think even for someone that doesn't have a felony or isn't inside the criminal justice system in any way, I think it's difficult right now. Um, a lot of the sober living houses uh, don't they're not there's a big issue right now with so I have a roommate, and he lived in a particular sober living house and was the only one actually clean and sober. So he he tells stories about waking up in the morning and going to take a shower before he goes to work, and some random guy that doesn't even live in the house is in the shower. He's like, yeah, excuse me, I need to, I pay you rent here. And so regulating some of these sober living houses, and maybe doing some of that stuff is going to help some of these guys that really want to do good, as well. I think there's a lot of issues in that too. Um, there's it's just a struggle with, how, I mean, if you don't have a job when you get out, how are you going to pay rent too? That's an issue. Um, there's a lot of other things that you know there are resources, but I think those resources are spread pretty thin as far as my knowledge of that. So
What's been your experience, Mary?
Well, again, I've gotten really lucky. My father-in-law is my landlord, so I didn't have to really go through many hoops. However, I know that this is like kind of the abysmal section, because when you think about like housing subsidies, there's not, like Jason said, it's not really a feasible thing. And beyond those, I mean, the housing market right now, without having a felony conviction, is almost impossible to get into. And so I think we have to address our general housing crisis as a whole, before we are able to narrow it down to people who are reentering society. But I think that this is another area where the Ban the Box initiative kind of falls into, is because when you do those rental applications, there is a box. Are you a felon? Do you have felony convictions? Have you ever been convicted of a crime before, even in general, even a misdemeanor? And so I think that this Ban the Box initiative, Fair Chance initiative, can bleed over into this housing portion.
Maybe this is a great question for Ruby and the ACLU. Is there a discussion going on about discrimination in housing, or is this even considered a discrimination issue?
I think there's a lot of stakeholders that would have to discuss with, and we have had discussions with a lot of housing partners in terms of, what the screening process, like what does it look like to update the screening processes for folks, to make it easy for ex-offenders, to be able to apply. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for discussion and like what that could look like. In terms of like discrimination, I think it's just, there's a lot of bases, like there's currently laws in place that, based on like religion, race, sex, and so forth, that you can't discriminate. And having a criminal conviction is not part of that. And so like, I think it's just like having that discussion of like, what can we do right now, in not only in policy, but like in other forms of having conversations with organizations that work in housing, and like how do we change these processes and educate folks on the opportunity of providing housing for folks that are that need that stability, right? Not only jobs, but housing. And we know from a research done by the Prison Policy Initiative that says that former incarcerated individuals are 10 times more likely to become homeless than the general population. And so I think, again, this housing conversation is, again, one of the puzzle pieces that we have to discuss in when it comes to recidivism, right? And so there's just a lot of things contributing into that.
David, can I ask a question?
Definitely.
Thank you. And I just saw the comments on our chat about the sober houses that Jason mentioned. And I've heard friends or that have relatives in those homes that don't want their son or daughter going into there because they're not sober. There's a lot of drugs and things in those places. I don't know who supervises that. Who, maybe Tim knows or others know how we might be able to address that. I assume there's got to be regulations and somebody watching that, but it seems like something that could be improved.
So I can address that, sir. So right now, the way the transitional housing works is basically they get on an approved housing list with the Department of Correction, and district managers actually go out and inspect and look at the homes. After that, we basically there's no legal jurisdiction whatsoever over transitional housing. If when parole officers enter the home, they look and see if there's anything going on. There's one in particular where I have made a comment that, hey, I hear there's drugs in this house all the time. When parole officers go out, they take the dogs, they don't find any drugs. So they go out, but people know they're coming out, or the drugs aren't kept in the home or whatever. So it is a big picture. And it's one of the things I think Representative Nekachi and I've had this conversation. I don't know if you remember, about a year ago, we talked about it, where, and I've talked with Senator Wintrow quite often about this. Is a really big issue. We have a lot of transitional houses, like 85 transitional houses in the state of Idaho. And there are some really good ones that actually do have programming, that do some really good jobs, and they're clean, they're safe, they're sober, and all that kind of thing. And then we have some other ones that are basically for profit. They really don't care. The homes are not, they're not a place that I would want to live. But we don't have any standards for these homes after the fact, after they're on the list. And that's something, again, that we've talked about within the department. And there's some legal issues, legal concerns on why we don't have an overall Department of Corrections standard on those. We've been in conversations with an organization that actually they do provide, and they provided information on how there can be a nonprofit created that can oversee them. And I know, I apologize, I don't know the whole ins and outs of it, but I know there's been discussions with our new CISs. I don't know the degree of those discussions for housing at this point in time. We're trying to get some oversight. So it is an issue, and both with the drugs and all that kind of a thing. As far as availability, we're also on the same thing. We don't have enough. We had one in Coeur d'Alene, actually, that the landlord basically said, I don't want to use you anymore. I was okay with that because the home was disgusting. It was filthy. When I was up there a year ago, we found a raccoon, or a possum, I should say, in the refrigerator. It is just ridiculous what we find. And those are the kind of places that I wouldn't want somebody to go. So it's a really big issue. We've got another one where a father, actually, his son lived in a transitional home and was disgusted by the way the son had to live. So he bought a place, and he's actually creating a transitional home right now. And his place is going to be really super nice. We had another individual try to buy a local hotel to convert that into a transitional house with 84 rooms. funding was the issue. He couldn't get the funding for it. So there's a lot of things where we are trying hard to make it better, but the department doesn't have, and we're not in real estate, so we don't buy transitional homes or do any of that kind of thing. So, I think we're trying to do the right thing. And I know it's an issue in the transitional home environment. If I may speak on the rental in the community as well, and that's one of the things the representative I talked about. One of the things I've talked to Senator Winthrop about is we need to change, again, kind of what Ruby was saying, the application process, because there's some of these apartment complexes that they do say they'll take your $45 application fee knowing they're not going to rent to you. And I know there's law in the books that says they're not allowed to do that, but they do it anyway because there's no teeth in the law. And how do you prove that you were discriminated against because you have a felony conviction versus somebody else? I've talked to some folks that are property managers, and they've made the same comment. They've stated it's against the law, but it happens all the time because nobody can really prove it. So there needs to be something that's enacted that states that, if I come in and I have a job and I can meet the qualification, there are certain restrictions. I understand that. There are certain restrictions for sex offenders living, within day school or, daycares and schools, and I get all that. But other than those kinds of restrictions, it'd be nice to be able to open that up to where if I have the job and I can provide first and last and I can pay the rent, why would I be denied just because of the felony? And again, I think that's a huge discussion that I think that we need to have. I've had it with, again, some of our legislators. They agree there's a problem, but I don't know what the solution is, and they don't either. But I think it's a discussion where it needs to happen, and we need to get a handle on it, because you're right. There's people out there that they really have a right to live in a safe, clean place, and they're not given that opportunity because they have this felony thing. So anyway, sorry.
No, I think that's a lot of great input there. I guess for a state that prides itself on being the least regulated state in the country, that's become a touting, a line that we hear a lot, and that can have benefits. But in this case, maybe there are drawbacks. I don't know, Senator Lakey, if you want to talk about, is there a stomach for creating oversight for housing like that? Would that be something that would be the Department of Corrections or the Department of Health and Welfare?
Possibly. I've been actively involved in the deregulation, occupational licensing reform efforts that's been bipartisan. It seems like, if a housing facility, entity, whatever, is going to call themselves or hold themselves out as a clean and sober environment, that's their choice. If they're going to choose to do that, then there should be some accountability for that description or holding themselves out as that. And that there should be some additional oversight. If they're not going to hold themselves out as that kind of facility, then, okay, you're not subject to checking. But I don't know enough about the functionality of it to say how that would work, but that seems like it makes sense to me. And it's especially if state funds are used, some of the additional funding we're trying to implement to help pay for these things. We want to make sure people are going to a safe and sober environment if we're spending state dollars on that. So I could definitely see some arguments for it. I'm just not sure how to implement and move that forward.
My question, if I would be, I know this is just being really bold, but I would like to have a conversation with somebody at legislation to talk about this, because I think that's where it's going to have to start. I think that we need to have some kind of regulation on transitional housing where none exists right now. And again, a lot of it comes back to, I wrote up a set of standards, and our legal department says I can't really call them standards. So I said, okay, expectations. But the concern is that if an organization, a transitional house, violates or doesn't uphold one of those expectations, now the Department of Corrections is liable financially, and that we could be sued if something is not done. So that's where it comes to where there needs to be some kind of oversight, and that's what's not happening. And I could give you the name of some of these transitional houses that, in my opinion, they're not being good landlords, and they're treating our people with disrespect, and they're just not nice. And I have nothing that I can do about it at my level at the department, because there's no legal oversight to be able to become a transitional house. It's a W-9 with the city. You know, you register with the city, you submit a W-9 with the state, and that's pretty much it. It's a super simple process. And again, I think that if we could have some kind of state, oversight, that again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just chime in to agree that, I think, deregulation conversations are one thing, and, making, streamlining occupational licensing. When we're putting public dollars into something, like, we need to be able to make sure we're getting a quality service with the public dollars. So I'd be really curious to continue this conversation, because it sounds like, I guess, it just kind of functions like, maybe a little bit like Section 8. You get your Section 8 voucher and you can shop around, but there are these things that these standards that you have to meet as a private provider, because otherwise there's these terrible things are happening and people are making money while just not providing the service that I think our taxpayers expect.
It's definitely been our experience that all of the things that we've heard here are accurate, that there are some providers out there that are doing a really stellar job, and they are kind of the model for what I would love to see statewide. Funding can be an issue for kind of expanding that, but there are some places that are terrible and everyone knows they're terrible, but people getting out of incarceration have to go somewhere, and they aren't likely to go into their own apartment at some complex. It's just not how it works. And so it would be really great to see a conversation follow this event and into the future. I don't know if there's time in this session, but sometime over the course of the next year, of possible oversight and regulations, and determining whether, if public funds are being used to pay for transitional housing for someone, that comes with some strings attached, which is, if you're a clean and sober house, you don't have drugs there, and some other basic stuff like that. So I really think that that's an awesome conversation.
If I could interject one other thing. So, and I'm reading some of the notes over there where people are aware of it. They're stating that the drugs and things are there. Anytime anyone suspects that there's drugs in a transitional house, the best thing to do is to call the local district office so that probation and parole knows. And if they're given word on that, then they would be able to go out and do the inspection, if you will, and take the dogs out and to do an actual search for those drugs. So we are very, very open to, if that is told, then we need to have the probation and parole go out and do a check on that, because they will do that. And again, during COVID, it's been more difficult because, again, the restrictions and the safety of our probation and parole officers, we've not wanted them to go into the homes because of potential infection. But if there's a safety issue or something, if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. So anytime we do know that, again, district offices, they will send probation and parole officers out to have a check on those. So just so that that is something that we will do.
David, if I could add to, like, in no way am I a housing expert or anything, but like recommending for, if, it's really important for community to know, like, what laws are in place in terms of housing, and like what is considered a discrimination, and like what housing laws are in place. So like the Intermountain Fair Housing does a wonderful job of presenting for folks that are formerly incarcerated, and like what are their rights, and like what laws are in place in terms of protection, and understanding like what processes are in place. And so, and also definitely have an advocacy side. So if anything, definitely recommend reaching out to the Intermountain Fair Housing Council.
I did an internship with Jesse Tree, and they were always relying on them as well. They're a great resource for all of that. So one of the line that I kept using in the promotional stuff was, you know, where are we at today? What works? What doesn't work? And where do we go from here? So as we're getting into the last little bit of the summit, I guess I would just like to go around to each of you and kind of touch on that. Each one of you has your own perspective based on your experiences and the work that you do surrounding this. What works? What would you like to see change? And what exactly does the criminal justice system in Idaho look like when it's all said and done, if you could just wave your magic wand and change it? I guess, Ruby, you're up on my screen, so I'll let you go and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, personally, right? We would. Man, this is a hard question, because it hits deep, right? When you really reflect on it. And I think there's like no perfect system, because there's always something that could always use change. And so for me, ideally is, starting from the roots of where we're seeing folks being targeted, or like in terms of like race, seeing a lot of people of color being incarcerated, and recognizing that there is a racial justice component into our criminal justice system, and being able to recognize that there's inaccessibilities for folks in order to be able to successfully thrive. And so being able to address reform in a humane way is just really important. And also for the ACLU, being able to address criminal justice reform in a humane way, and in a way that we can start shifting away from carceral systems, and being able to address folks for mental illnesses, being able to provide educational resource, and also like fund our education system, being able to prioritize that first. And so I will probably say on my behalf, being able to see real justice is to start incarcerating folks for things that are needed for them to address in a mental health way. We know a lot of folks, and I know a lot of folks that need medical help, and being incarcerated is not the solution for them. And so I think ideally it would be good for us to have discussions, and to be able to meet in the middle of, because we won't be able to agree, we all have our different perspectives of, what solutions may look like. But I think there will be no justice in the criminal justice system until we start addressing things in a humane way, and moving it towards real reform, and that will actually help people thrive in their communities, and also uplift the safety of those individuals outside of the system too. So it's a balance, and I probably don't have the perfect answer right now, but I think we're all working towards that in some way.
Thank you for that, Ruby. I don't think any of us have the perfect answer, and I don't think anybody expects that, but I think it's great when we can have these conversations and weigh what other people think and feel against what our own experiences, and try to do better as a society. I'll go with Jason next. What works, what doesn't work, and what would it look like if you could wave the magic wand and turn it into your system?
Yeah, I don't know about the magic wand. Uh, but honestly, like I think overall the direction that the department is going is positive, right? Like I don't think that they ever were like, let's make it really hard for these guys, right? I don't think anybody's ever said that. But there's definitely some things where, just for example, in 1996, I learned cognitive self change. Okay. It was a very simple and effective program that involved changing some of your thought patterns and recognizing thinking errors in situations. Uh, every year after that, they changed it. They added more to it. They morphed it into this huge, complicated monster, and then they would reform it again. And it's like, why not just stick with the simple program to begin with? So that's one of my, kind of gripes, I guess, with the department is that um, they get great programs that work really well, and then they stop using them. They find another program and model different programs and bring in all kinds of programs, and then by the end of the day, it's like I don't know what to think, right? Like so. And I think that that's one of the concerns that they're trying to address right now too, with some of the programs that they're implementing. I haven't been involved in any of those programs, so I don't know exactly how it works. But you know, uh, with the housing thing, there are some great places here in Idaho that offer some amazing transitional housing. The problem is like those places are small, and the people that are there stay there for an extended amount of time because they're safe there and they're good places. The ones that aren't, they're in and out and in and out, and that doesn't provide that environment. Uh, One of the other areas that I'm really involved and have a passion for is sentencing, changing some of the sentencing laws and ways that Idaho, for instance, my situation, I have a 25-year sentence that I've had time added to. Okay. So I can't remember the math because I wasn't really thinking about this at the beginning, but it's like by the time if I top out my sentence in 2029, by and that time I think I'll have done 34 years on a 25-year sentence. So that's kind of, and I'm not complaining that it's broken. I'm just saying that like, is that necessary? I mean, I've been out of prison since 2006. For and I've done very well, and I'm still on parole. And I'm not complaining that because right now it gives me kind of a what I call street cred to argue my point about this, right? That it is not broken, that they let people off that you know maybe have gotten some violations and got in trouble, and they get out, and I'm still on. So uh, I also have a vested interest in just um, right now my focus mainly on the fair chance employment. Like when I go to the legislature, I'm discussing fair chance employment. That's where my radar is right now. That's the only thing I really have on it. For the future, this other stuff that I'm talking about is just kind of what I'm bringing up. In a perfect world, I think it would just be easy, but you build these programs and then you kind of change them into the thing. But I think that you got to stick to what works, and the numbers. The therapeutic communities were amazing, and I think that the numbers were like 80% of people that went through the therapeutic community were staying out and doing well, and there is no more therapeutic communities. You know what I mean? Um, where the accountability level was higher, I did better. You know, I really strived in those kind of environments where I had to take a really good look at how my behavior was. And I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I like to focus on those are my problems, but really the problems is my behavior and my accountability, the choices that I make to use those drugs, and the excuses that I use to justify drinking is where my problem was. It's not necessarily the alcohol and the drugs themselves, right? So that was just a symptom of the disease that I have of my thinking's broken. And a lot of times when I'm faced with a tough situation, I don't know how to make that choice to do the right thing. And so with those kind of programs that where we had to, focus on that, they did better. And um and I don't know why, there's multiple different, I've been told multiple different things why some of those programs have been thrown out in the past, but um I, I mean, like I said, I could go on about this all day, but we gotta stick to something and just keep to it, find what works and then adjust that, small changes, not like huge ones, and I think that it'll all work out. Overall, I think the leadership at the Department of Corrections is pretty amazing right now. Tim and all the team over there at the Reentry Center are headed definitely headed in the right direction. I think the director T. Walt, the COVID kind of threw a lot of things. I had a lot of meetings set up with some of the people to see how I could help them and how they could help me, and we could all help each other. But I think that the department using people like me that have and Mary that have been involved in the system and putting value in our opinions as well now too is a huge thing, right? Like where before they would never ask somebody that had been incarcerated before, like what do you think works, and they're asking those questions and they're talking to us now, and they're using our input to make the system a better place. So
Thank you, Jason. I think if I can interject my opinion in here, I would love to see more of a focus on community-based solutions. I've lived in Idaho for 37 years now. I don't think it matters whether you live in Coeur d'Alene or Nampa or the north end of Boise or Pocatello. Change is here and it's coming faster every day. There are people in my neighborhood, I don't even know who they are, and they disappear before I get a chance to meet them, and new people come along, and there's so much change. And I think that we're losing some of that sense of community and the strength that comes along with it. So I would love to see an investment in community initiatives to reduce crime and to address some of the things that impact all of us. As far as the system itself, the Department of Corrections has made a lot of changes, and I'm impressed with the directions that we are headed over there. I would love to see the Parole Commission switch it up and review people on the front end. I would love for you to come into receiving and know exactly what is expected of you, and then you can follow that path all through your incarceration, and you'll know exactly when you're going to get out. We talked about it here. I have a real passion for education in general. It's something that I feel like is going to help balance out my criminal history, is that I've done things in my life to better myself and get an education. So I love seeing the education component starting to build there. I love seeing the vocational stuff going on there. I would love to see that grow and really be a focus over there. I also would love to see on the back end, when people get out, to see these barriers reduced so that they can find meaningful housing. A lot of times it's not just a person, it's their family, they have kids. And so finding housing, finding employment, and all of these different things that we've been working on, I love to see more of those barriers reduced for people. And then something that I've become very passionate about that I've seen work in my life is the reduction of this permanent punishment, of this permanent record following you for the rest of your life. It really does, to me, feel like a life sentence. And it would be great if at some point you could get on with your life without having this little asterisk next to your name. And so if after maybe 10 years of keeping your nose clean and doing everything you're supposed to, that stuff no longer goes with you, I would love to see that. It's worked for me when I've gotten employment in Washington State, and it's allowed me to, move forward in my life in meaningful ways. So I would love to see that happen here in Idaho. How about you, Mary? What do you think works? What do you think doesn't work? And what does a perfect system look like to you?
Well, I don't think there is a perfect system, first of all. This is a really hard aspect because there's so many things that go into criminal justice. When you look at the community-based strength, it starts with the community and education. Then you go to the police force, and are they discriminating against others? Possibly sending out maybe professional social workers or mental health professionals as first responders, rather than having just the police come out with their guns and their tasers and intimidating people who may be under a stressful situation or find themselves in kind of a dire circumstance that may not need police intervention, but may need a social worker to kind of facilitate their emotions. And then you get into the prison system and you don't know what's expected. You don't know how to get your good time. So if we can expand good time, and that would increase the possibility for parole eligibility. And then that goes on to the prosecutors and how they prosecute. Are we giving them rewards for volume-based wins, you know? And I mean, it goes into also the aspect of, can we reclaim our lives, that life sentence that you were talking about? It is this, we're not supposed to have double jeopardy. It's not supposed to affect us once we've done our time and paid our dues. However, it does. And so if we just kind of expand upon our accesses to all of these things, then may be able to come together. But we can't address one thing at a time. We have to go for the criminal, we have to go for the community base. We have to address our police force. We have to address the prison system. We have to address the prosecutors. And then we have to address reentry. We need to fund reentry. We need to fund St. Vincent. We need to fund peer recovery and peer wellness, and all of these extra programs that are available for the community. And so it's not, and all of the laws that encompass that, going back to what Jason said, like the mandatory minimum law, you are automatically, if the prosecutor chooses to charge you with something that could fall under a mandatory minimum, you're automatically spending 3 years, 7 years, you know, without a trial and without getting what you're ensured in the Constitution, which is due process. So I think there's so many aspects, and it's not going to be addressing just one, but all of these things: the preventative, the proactive, and the what we do after the fact.
All right, thank you for that. Tim, I'll send it over to you. What do you think works? What doesn't work? And what would you do if you had the power to change it all?
So we actually do have a lot of initiatives going on. One of the things that Jason was mentioning, we actually have an advocacy council, which Bree and I started up about a year ago. And our committee basically is returning citizens right now. And we've had several meetings where we're trying to incorporate a lot of the returning citizens into some of the changes and the processes. So like we're doing a rewrite of our pre-release program right now. And we've invited some returning citizens to be a part of that. I'm working with a group out at ISCC. We actually have 4 projects going on out there. One of them, we're together creating a reentry orientation for people that are getting ready to leave. We're creating a family reunification program where we're working with a mental health professional, health and welfare, to create this group session where we can have the resident and the family members on the outside. So we're working on that. We're also working on the mentor program to make that better. But we're including a lot of returning citizens, and we're getting advice. About 2 years ago, I pulled a group together. I've got a reentry committee that I created from all sections of the department to include the commission. And we wrote a reentry services guide, and I got some input from returning citizens on what information do you need right now when you walk out the gate to help you to be successful. So we're really bringing in the people that have experienced prison life and reentry into the community, because they're the ones that have lived it and they know what we need. We think we can tell you, well, you need this, but we really don't know because we haven't lived it. So we are really doing that, and I'm excited about all of that. And to continue moving forward with that is what I want to see. The other thing that I think is really important, again, we had this grant in District 4 for it's the 60/60 Bridging the Gap grant, and it expires. I got a 1-year extension, but it expires the end of September this year, where we have 6 reentry specialists that go into the prison 60 days prior to release. They follow 60 days after. And the grant, when it was written, is a little restrictive. I would like to see, I'm sorry, let me kind of back up. Part of that grant, we had money where we actually opened a one-stop reentry center here in Ada County. And again, the numbers of people that we have helped have been really incredible. And I go back to people that have worked with our specialists. They say at a month out, this is the longest I've ever been out. We had some people that have been out 6 months and like, I've never been out this long before, but you've helped me. You've encouraged me, you've given me tools and referrals to keep me out. And there's that connection. So I would like to see this kind of a project get funded where we can actually continue to have the one-stop center as well as reentry specialists in every district, because again, it's proven that this is making a difference in the world of reentry because people know they can come back. And I'd like to see some of those restrictions, taken away. From the reentry specialist, where they can work with them a little bit longer, and to be able to have, if a program or a case manager or a PO says, hey, I want you to work with these people, we can do that. We do that now, but we don't get the credit for it, meaning that it doesn't count on the numbers. So like when we do numbers, it's only those that are actually enrolled in this program. So the last report that I just did for last year, I incorporated the program numbers, if you will, but the centers make a difference. And I know legislation approved the CISs statewide, where we have 4 of those, and those are out in 4 different parts of the state. That's going to make an impact for people that are already out that are struggling. That's a really cool deal, because then POs can make referrals based on the need of the individuals versus putting them right back in prison on a parole violation or something. So that's going to be really cool when and they're all open and they're working. So that's something. So I think that we're really trying to make a difference. We're trying really hard to improve what we're doing as a department. And I will say what's already been said. Our director, deputy director, Josh and Bree, they're my bosses, and they're wonderful people. And again, I'll take something to Bree. She's my supervisor, and I'll say, hey, Bree, I think we should do. And she's like, okay. So she's very open to suggestion. And that's the thing that's really cool. I have a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. And again, people I work with, know my passion for reentry. I want people to succeed. And we're really, again, we've made great strides to do that. And I will say again, I'll reference Senator Wintrow with her help. She and Joni Peterson from Interfaith Sanctuary, they push really hard to help us get ID cards in the prisons. And it's now happening. Alberta over there at ITD has been amazing to work with. And again, we're getting 5 new equipments in 5 new prisons within the next couple of weeks, so that we're going to be able to process cards for everybody. I know it's, it'd be nice if we had funding that they could be paid for, but that hasn't happened yet, but that's another discussion. The Social Security cards, that's a really big deal. If we can prepare people when they walk out the gate to have the tools that they need to be successful, that's what excites me, and that's what encourages me. So I would really like to see what we've already talked about, and I'm probably overstepping my bounds here, but I would really like to see some kind of help with the state on transitional housing. That's one of my programs under my my management, but I have no authority over the transitional houses themselves. The only thing I have authority over is the money to pay for transitional housing, because again, we have no standard, we have no expectations, we have no legal authority. I would really like to see that, because there's somewhere I really believe they need to be fixed, and I have the authority to fix them at this point. That's something that's, I don't know if it's a state, city, county, I don't know, but there needs to be something there. And I would really, really like some help doing that. And again, Bree and Josh agree with us. We need to do something. And I know there's discussions with the CISs on the transitional housing, but I've not been a part of those, so I don't know where that's going at this point. But that's a big issue, and I would really like to see that resolved, because in my opinion, somebody walks out the gate, if they walk into a transitional house that is dirty, or that doesn't have light bulbs, or that doesn't provide sheets and blankets and pillows, their immediate reaction is, great, what's going to happen now? And a lot of the times they fail because of the fact that they don't feel safe, they don't feel secure, and they're going into an environment that you and I wouldn't want to be in, but we make them do it because they have nowhere else to go. So those are some of the thoughts that I have. And again, I could talk all day about it, because I'm really passionate about this, and I really want people to get opportunities to be successful when they walk out the gate. And I really do believe, as a department, we're moving in the right direction. I think the leadership's phenomenal and very open to ideas and suggestions. And I know that legislators have worked really well with Josh, and I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of cool stuff that we're trying to get done. So Senator and Representative, thank you for your support to the department and to our folks. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to send it over to Eddie Price, who is one of BarNone's board members. Let's see what she has to say.
There we go. So as far as things that are going well, I'm coming from my own personal biases. As a healthcare provider, I have to say I've been very impressed with the department and their COVID response. That when COVID first hit, I just went, oh my goodness, we're going to see a bunch of deaths out there. And I've been really impressed with that piece of it. And then my background is, I was, 10 years ago, I was one of those people out in the public that thought, you do a crime, you need to do the time. And that's just the way it needs to be, until I had a loved one in the system. And I wasn't aware that people have a hard time getting a job after incarceration. I had no idea that your sentence follows you for life. I didn't know that there were infants visiting their parents that were incarcerated. So what I would like to see change is some real public education, that when we are punishing an individual for a crime that they've committed, that they need to be held accountable for, we need to look bigger than that. And we need to look at their family members who are also being punished. I've sat with moms who have had their children incarcerated. And I've sat with moms who are bringing their, young children in. And I think, who are we punishing here when we are taking a breadwinner out of the household? I think that there needs to be some public education. And is that really our intent, that we're going to hold children accountable for the actions of their parents? Not that there doesn't need to be accountability. I firmly believe in accountability. But I would like to see some public education about, really, what are we doing? Who are we punishing, and why? And is that in the best interest of the community? And then also education on the backside, when people come out, that their sentence does follow them for life. And is that really our intention? Because I think the public is not aware of that at all.
All right. Thank you, Eddie. I guess we'll go over to Senator Lakey. What works, what doesn't work, and what would it look like if you could make it your own?
Well, thank you, David. I think you did say we got a magic wand at the beginning. So my magic wand, when you wave it, it makes money. It's one of those things. We have so many good things that that are important, and limited funds to go around. So I'll get past that unrealistic, view there. But I think I got to step back even further, not just the system, but the foundational aspect of it, helping people be successful in the community as a whole. Do we have a strong education system? Do we have a strong economy where people can earn a living, and support themselves and their families? Do we have good opportunities for youth in our communities, for education, for them to learn skills and priorities and values? And I think that comes down to a large degree, good, strong families in our communities. I think it's important to support our law enforcement and have strong and safe communities. Overall, I think we do a pretty good job with, we talked about our recent efforts as far as the different departments. I get a chance to visit with the Department of Juvenile Corrections pretty regularly, and Monty's doing a great job over there. Our number of commitments are down. They're trying to help keep kids in their communities and have early intervention to break any cycle or habit that might develop, and stop them from going further in that system or into the adult system. We've talked about, and I'll continue to sing the praises of Director T. Walt and Tim and others in the current system with our adult corrections. I think they're going in the right direction. I get to meet regularly with our pardons and parole folks, and those are good people on that board that care, and I think they're making good decisions. As I said, our numbers are starting to reflect that. So I feel like, we're putting the right people in generally, and generally we're letting the right people out. My perfect focus is what we've talked about already. Once, when they're in, our focus on what happens when they're out. While they're incarcerated, it's not just doing time. They have an opportunity to improve themselves, and whether that's education or job skills, vocational training, those kind of things. I know they have those programs, but can we do better? Can we offer more programs while they're in? And then definitely the focus once they're out on those three things that I've talked about. Tim mentioned a support system, which I hadn't included in my list, but employment, housing, and transportation, and continue to focus on those. I liked your comment, David, about community-based treatment. If they can be close to their families, their support system, where they grew up, what they're familiar with, that helps them be more successful. So I guess my perfect world is continuing to build on those things that we've talked about today. We're going in the right direction, and continue to support those particular areas to help people be successful.
All right, thank you, Senator Lakey. Well, we started with you, Representative Nakachea, and here we are at the end again with you. You bookended the event. So tell me, what works, what doesn't work, and wave the magic wand and make it perfect.
Oh my goodness, thanks for the extra pressure you just put on me. I agree with so much that has already been said. Fair chance, all of the reentry work that Tim described so well, that's what we have to be doing on the back end. We also have to recognize incarceration it disrupts your employment ties, it disrupts community ties, it disrupts family ties, and so it has to be a last resort. We need to make sure we're fully leveraging problem-solving courts, drug courts, just other ways we can address issues that people are having that might be less costly and more effective. Senator Lakey touched on a little bit of what I've been thinking about in terms of just prevention going way back. When you look at when a child is first born, there's so many things that child is going to experience that little nudges this way or that way, whether they build strong emotional, social and emotional skills or not. Those have lifelong impacts. And we're one of the few states that doesn't invest any state dollars in preschool. When we know quality childcare, those interactions with a caring adult builds those social emotional skills, and we actually see in those long-term studies that they actually save money because they're and the biggest factor is prison costs. So your childhood is not destiny, but there are a lot of factors there that nudge kids this way or that. The toxic stress of experiencing poverty in childhood is a huge problem, and we have pre-K makes a difference. We also know home visiting programs make a difference. These are voluntary programs where a vulnerable family can decide that they want to participate and have a skilled home visitor come and visit them periodically over a series of months to help them build resiliency, help them build skills, help them set goals for themselves. And the outcomes are pretty astounding in terms of kids and the families who have gone through these programs. Those kids have increased school readiness when they show up to school. They do better in school once they're there, and the parents actually increase their economic security. So whether they're setting a goal about getting a certain kind of job or training or education, these things can be really transformative. And it's really about just a caring, skilled person coming and being there for them as they work through the challenges. Life, it's hard to raise kids, and when you don't have wages that support a family, it's really hard and really stressful. And so we need to support families in becoming resilient and setting them up for success way back when. And the cost of doing business as usual is very high. So we need to put that on the table when we're saying, well, can we invest in prevention? To me, the answer is clear that we need to invest in prevention so that we can save money on those those systems that are more costly and that don't protect public safety. So anyway, I'm inspired by so much that is happening, the good things that are happening. I'm inspired by the advocacy that I think is new in this state, led by folks by Jason and Mary and so many others who are speaking now about the changes that we need to make. So I'm hopeful for the future, and I have all of you to thank for that.
All right, thank you, Representative Nekachea. Well, I want to thank everybody who's watching today. Of course, we're on Zoom as a webinar. We're doing Facebook Live. Ultimately, we'll be on Vimeo and Instagram as well. I want to thank all of you who decided to agree to be panelists today. I know 2.5 hours in front of a computer is a long time, but I feel like we had some productive conversation, and there's going to be some things that are taken out of this and worked on in the future that are going to make an impact on people's lives. So I really, really appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day today. And I'm just hopeful. I'm just hopeful that everything that we've talked about from every different perspective is that we can work together to do good things in Idaho. And that's how we do things, is together. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm impressed with all the ideas and all the feedback today. So thank you everyone for showing up, for participating, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to see you all.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, everyone. This is great.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Thank you.